So hey anime fans. The series name is What If Naruto Got Harem with Wednesday Addam. So let's start the series. The air in the Hokage's office was thick with the competing smells of antiseptic, old paper, and the faint, ever-present cherry blossom perfume Lady Tsunade favored. Sunlight sliced through the high windows, illuminating swirling motes of dust that danced like lazy fireflies. Naruto Uzumaki stood at a weary attention, his orange jumpsuit a jarring exclamation point in the solemn room. Beside him, propped in a hard-backed chair, sat Wednesday Addams, her posture so rigid it seemed to defy the very concept of comfort. The dark stain on the side of her black dress had crusted to a dull maroon, a stark contrast to her alabaster skin. Tsunade Senju, the fifth Hokage, leaned forward on her desk, her hands steepled. Her gaze, sharp enough to dissect a butterfly at 50 paces, moved between the fidgeting blonde boy and the unnervingly still girl. Shizen, hovering behind Tsunade with Taunton in her arms, looked concerned. Kakashi Hatake, leaning against the wall by the door with his nose buried in make-out paradise, gave the impression of nonchalance, but his single visible eye hadn't turned a page in 3 minutes. You dragged a critically injured, unidentified, non-shinobi civilian out of the forest of death. Tsunade began, her voice a low, dangerous rumble. A civilian who, according to your own muddled report, fell out of a shiny hole in the air while fighting a shadow monster. Yeah. Databeo. Naruto affirmed, then winced. I mean, yes, Hokage-sama. She was hurt. I couldn't leave her. And you claim she is your cousin? Tsunade's eyebrow threatened to disappear into her hairline. From a real distant hidden village, Naruto blurted, sweat beading on his temple. The village of, Gloom. In the land of perpetual drizzle. Yeah. We just met. Family reunion. A silence followed, broken only by the quiet, rhythmic tap of Wednesday's finger against the wooden arm of her chair. It was a sound like a beetle scuttling across a coffin lid. She has no chakra network, Naruto, Kakashi said lightly, not looking up from his book. Not a trace. That's not possible for anyone from any of the 5 great nations, let alone a hidden village. It's like saying a fish has no gills. Wednesday's obsidian eyes slid to Kakashi. Your assessment is biologically narrow. I possess a metaphysical lattice that interfaces with the ambient potential for decay, sorrow, and silent contemplation. It is a more elegant system than your internal energy furnace, which, from my observations, causes rampant hyperthermia and excessive shouting. The room went still. Shizen blinked. Kakashi's eye flickered from his book to Wednesday. Tsunade's lips pressed into a thin line. She talks funny, Naruto offered weakly. What is your name, girl? Tsunade asked, her voice dropping its bureaucratic edge for one of clinical command. Wednesday Friday Addams. Age? 16. Purpose in Konohagakure? Dimensional translocation due to a ritual confluence. Unintentional. I seek to repair the breach and return to my familial necropolis. The ambient cheer here is corrosive. Tsunade pinched the bridge of her nose. A vein throbbed gently at her temple. The medical part of her brain catalogued the girl's pallor, the shallow breathing suggesting internal pain fiercely controlled. The shinobi part screamed security risk in flashing red letters. The Hokage part saw a diplomatic and metaphysical nightmare wrapped in a black pinafore. You are injured, Tsunade stated. You are also an anomaly. Until we understand what you are and what that breach means for our village, you will remain in Konoha under observation. She turned her gaze to Naruto. It was the look she reserved for particularly stubborn, sticky problems. Naruto. You found her. You vouched for her. She is your responsibility. You will house her. You will ensure she attends a basic cultural orientation at the academy. You will report any strange behavior, any attempt to use her metaphysical lattice, directly to me or to Kakashi. Is that understood? Naruto's jaw dropped. What? In my apartment? But Hokage-bachan, it's a mess. And she's a girl. And weird. Your apartment has been condemned by the health department twice. I doubt her presence will lower its value. Tsunade deadpanned. And her being weird is a point in her favor, considering your social circle. Consider it a D-rank mission. An extended one. Wednesday turned her head slowly to look at Naruto. Her expression was that of an archaeologist examining a particularly simple fossil. You have a domicile? Is it prone to damp, structural flaws, or infestations of interesting vermin? It's fine, Naruto muttered, deflating. Good. It's settled, Tsunade said, her tone brooking no argument. Shizen will see to her injuries. Then Kakashi will escort you both. Dismissed. The walk to Naruto's apartment was conducted in a silence so profound it had its own texture. Kakashi led the way, his visible eye crinkling in what might have been amusement. Wednesday moved with a stiff, precise gait, her body clearly still protesting the healing jutsu Shizen had applied. Her eyes, however, were everywhere, recording data with a terrifying efficiency. They passed a street vendor selling dango. The sweet, sticky smell filled the air. An olfactory assault of cloying sucrose, Wednesday noted, her nose wrinkling slightly. A group of giggling children ran by, chasing a ball. Unregulated cacophony. The developing human is distressingly buoyant. A jonin flashed by on a rooftop, a blur of motion. The average velocity exceeds safe urban limits. The mortality rate for pedestrians must be fascinating. Naruto felt a headache brewing behind his eyes. It's not that bad. It's lively. Liveliness is often a precursor to decay, Wednesday replied. The more vigorous the organism, the more pronounced its eventual putrefaction. Kakashi chuckled. You'll fit right in. Naruto's apartment building loomed, a slightly sagging structure that had seen better decades. He fumbled with his keys, the metal clicking loudly in the quiet hall. He pushed the door open, revealing the chaotic landscape of his personal space. The main room was a monument to instant gratification. Empty ramen cups were stacked like a fragile, greasy Jenga tower on the low table. Dusty ninja scrolls lay unrolled beside discarded orange jumpsuits. A single, sad plant on the windowsill had long since given up the ghost, its brown leaves curling in despair. The walls were bare save for a slightly crooked poster of the fourth Hokage. The air smelled of old noodles, boy sweat, and neglect. Naruto rubbed the back of his head, a flush of embarrassment heating his cheeks. Sorry about the mess. I wasn't exactly expecting company. Wednesday stepped inside. She didn't react with disgust or shock. She simply stood in the center of the room, turning in a slow, full circle, her face a mask of analytical appraisal. It was more unnerving than any scream. Fascinating, she breathed, the word a soft exhalation. A habitat devoid of conscious design. A spontaneous ecosystem of transience and artificial flavoring. She walked to the ramen cup tower, peering at it. The structural integrity is compromised by lipid residue. A testament to haste. She moved to the dead plant, touching a brittle leaf. Solanum lycopersicum. Death by apathy. A common yet poignant end. Naruto stared. It's just a dead tomato plant. Was, Wednesday corrected. She then set her small, black travel bag, which had miraculously survived the dimensional trip, on the floor and got to work. What followed was not cleaning. It was a systematic, military-grade reconfiguration of space for optimal melancholic efficiency. She didn't ask, she simply acted. The ramen cups were not thrown away. They were meticulously cleaned, dried, and arranged on a high shelf in a spiral pattern she called a monument to consumed emptiness. The dirty laundry was gathered, not for washing, but sorted into piles based on fabric type and stain composition. A catalogue of your physical exertions. She pushed the furniture, the couch, the table, against the walls, leaving the center of the room starkly empty. Open space invites contemplation of the void, she explained. From her bag, she produced items that made Naruto's hair stand on end. A small, polished human skull, she claimed it was a teaching model, was placed on the windowsill, replacing the plant. A series of small, dark crystals were arranged in a geometric pattern on the floor in the corner. A glass jar containing a preserved, unidentified something floating in murky liquid found a home on the bookshelf. Hey! What is that? Naruto yelped, pointing at the jar. The larval form of a Goliath beetle from the Brazilian rainforest. Drowned in its own metabolic fluids during a failed molting. A reminder of nature's inherent cruelty. Naruto gulped. Right. The final touch was the lighting. She drew the thin, faded curtains completely shut, plunging the room into a deep twilight. Then, from her bag, she produced 3 black candles in heavy iron holders. She lit them with a match, the scratch flare hiss sound was jarringly loud, and placed them in a triangle around the empty center of the room. The flickering light cast long, dancing shadows that made the skull's grin seem to twitch. The apartment was now cool, dark, and smelled of dust, wax, and a faint herbal bitterness from the crystals. The chaotic liveliness was gone, replaced by a serene, sepulchral order. Naruto stood by the door, feeling like a trespasser in his own home. A strange mix of resentment, awe, and profound discomfort churned in his gut. You can't just change everything. Why not? Wednesday asked, finally turning to face him fully. The candlelight caught in her dark eyes, making them glint like chips of obsidian. Your previous configuration was inefficient and aesthetically distressing. This arrangement promotes a balanced humoral state and wards off intrusive, frivolous thoughts. My thoughts aren't frivolous. I think about important stuff. Like ramen. And training. And becoming Hokage. Ambition rooted in a desire for validation from those who once spurned you, Wednesday stated, as if reading a grocery list. A common, if tragically predictable, psychological narrative. The ramen is a carbohydrate-based coping mechanism for emotional neglect. Naruto felt a hot flare of anger, sharp and familiar. You don't know anything about me. You just got here. I know you have a demon fox sealed inside you that whispers to you in the dark, she said, her voice dropping to a flat, cold monotone. I know you sleep fitfully, your chakra spiking with anxiety dreams. I know you arrange your empty cups in towers because the act of creating something, even something doomed to collapse, temporarily abates the fear of your own impermanence. The anger vanished, sucked out of the room by the vacuum of her words. Naruto felt exposed, flayed open. He couldn't speak. Wednesday observed his reaction, her head tilted. I have overstepped. My familial socialization lacks certain, dampening filters. I speak truth as I perceive it. It is not meant to wound. Data is neutral. She walked to the small kitchen area, her shoes tapping softly on the linoleum. I require sustenance to facilitate tissue repair. What nutritional resources are available? Numbly, Naruto pointed to a cupboard. Cup noodles. Mostly. Wednesday opened it. She stared at the colorful, crinkly packages for a full 10 seconds. Processed grains, desiccated vegetables of dubious origin, a powdered amalgam of salt and monosodium glutamate. She closed the cupboard. Unacceptable. I will procure ingredients. Do you have currency? Naruto handed over a small wad of Rio, still in a daze. Wednesday took it, gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod, and slipped out the door. The silence she left behind was different now. It wasn't empty, it was charged with the echoes of her observations. Naruto looked around his transformed apartment. It felt like a stranger's house. A stranger who knew him better than anyone. He slumped onto the couch, the springs groaning in protest. He stared at the skull on the windowsill, its hollow gaze meeting his. What have I gotten myself into, Databeo? He whispered to the empty, candlelit room. Wednesday returned an hour later with a small paper bag. She worked in the kitchenette with surgical precision, producing a meal that looked like a still-life painting of despair, a dark, dense bread, a wedge of white cheese veined with blue mold, a handful of black olives, and 2 hard-boiled eggs she had somehow dyed a deep, grayish purple. She ate in silence, using a small knife and fork she produced from her bag. Naruto, his stomach growling, reluctantly boiled water for a cup noodle. The bright, salty smell of his chicken ramen clashed violently with the earthy, fermented aroma of Wednesday's meal. They ate on opposite sides of the low table, the candlelight flickering between them. The only sounds were the slurp of noodles, the delicate clink of Wednesday's cutlery, and the distant, muffled laughter of someone in another apartment. Why are you helping me? Naruto asked suddenly, breaking the long silence. Back in the forest. You could have just, I dunno, walked away after we beat that thing. Wednesday finished a precise bite of cheese before answering. You were a known variable in an unknown equation. Allied, you presented a higher probability of mutual survival than as an uncontrolled factor. Logic dictated cooperation. But you're still here. The Hokage said you have to be, but you're not trying to escape or anything. I am a guest, however unwilling, in your reality. The breach that brought me here is a wound. My departure would not suture it, it would merely leave a festering channel between our worlds. The entity we fought was a symptom. The cause remains. She looked at him, her black eyes unblinking. And you are now part of the cause. Your chakra is woven into the event's signature. The scene will resonate to your frequency. Where you are, disturbances will gather. My presence is, for now, a necessary containment parameter. Naruto set his empty cup down. So you're using me as bait. I am using you as a focal point. Bait implies a trap. Our objective is not capture, but closure. The methodology is similar, but the intent is surgical, not predatory. Naruto couldn't help it. A laugh bubbled up in his chest, a short, surprised bark. You're the weirdest person I've ever met. And I've met a lot of weird people. For the first time, he saw a flicker of something on her face. Not a smile, nothing so overt. But a subtle, almost microscopic relaxation of the tight muscles around her eyes. A faint, acknowledging gleam. The sentiment, she said, is reciprocated. Night deepened. Naruto, exhausted from the day's physical and emotional turmoil, unrolled a spare futon. Wednesday, refusing the bed, took a seat cross-legged in the center of her candlelit triangle on the floor, her back ramrod straight. She claimed it was for nocturnal meditation and ambient resonance monitoring. Naruto lay in the dark, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of his own apartment, the almost silent whisper of Wednesday's breathing, the soft crackle of candle wax, the faint, dry rustle that he swore was coming from the jar with the beetle. He was just drifting into an uneasy sleep when a new sound began. A soft, rhythmic knock. Not on the door. It seemed to come from the walls themselves. A dull, deep thump, 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 spaced about 10 seconds apart. It was the sound of a slow, giant heart. Naruto's eyes snapped open. He saw Wednesday's silhouette in the candlelight. She was perfectly still, her head tilted, listening. "The frequency has increased," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper yet cutting clearly through the dark. "It is seeking resonance." The thumping grew slightly louder. The candle flames, which had been burning steadily, suddenly guttered and dipped, stretching the shadows into long, grasping fingers. The air grew colder, raising goosebumps on Naruto's arms. Wednesday rose smoothly. From her bag, she produced a stick of white chalk. Without a word, she began to draw on the bare floorboards, her movements swift and sure. The design was complex, interlocking circles, angular sigils, lines that looked like mathematical equations gone mad. Naruto scrambled to his feet, his heart pounding a counter-rhythm to the eerie knocking. "What are you doing?" he hissed. "Establishing a receptive field," she replied, her focus absolute. "If it is knocking, we must open a window to see who or what is calling. Passive observation is insufficient. We require intelligence." "You're gonna let it in?" "A controlled ingress. A temporary aperture." She finished the final symbol with a flourish. The completed circle was about 3 feet across, a stark white contrast to the dark wood. She placed her palms on its edge. "Your chakra. A small amount. Feed it into the western glyph. The one shaped like a broken ladder." "And no way. That's a bad idea. Really, really bad. The knocking will not cease, Naruto Uzumaki. It will amplify. It will draw other things. We are a lighthouse in a fog of unreality. We must identify the nature of the fog." Her eyes met his, and in the crazily dancing light, he saw no fear, only a fierce, intellectual hunger. "Trust the logic." Everything in his shinobi training screamed no. But something else, the same gut instinct that had made him save her in the forest, twitched. He remembered her calm analysis in the fight, her ruthless efficiency. She wasn't suicidal. She was curious. Gritting his teeth, Naruto knelt. He focused, drawing a thin strand of chakra from his core. It glowed a faint blue in the gloom as he directed it to the chalk glyph sheet indicated. The moment his energy touched the line, the whole diagram flashed with a cold, violet light. The thumping stopped. For a second, there was perfect, breathless silence. Then the chalk lines themselves began to smoke, not with heat, but with a freezing, black vapor. The center of the circle darkened, not into a hole, but into a patch of pure, lightless void. From that void, a shape began to coalesce. It was small, no larger than a house cat, but utterly wrong. It looked like a malformed toad crafted from the clay of the forest of death, with patches of moss and twisted twigs for limbs. A single, milky eye swam in the center of its lumpy head. It didn't have a mouth, but a ragged hole from which issued a sound like wind through dead reeds. It pulsed with a faint, sickly green glow, the same energy as the shadow beast, but diluted, wild. It blinked its one eye, looking around the candlelit apartment. Wednesday leaned forward, fascinated. A chimeric elemental. A coalescence of location-specific life energy and residual poltergeist resonance. A scout. The creature's eye fixed on Naruto. It let out a higher-pitched keen and, with a sudden, shocking burst of speed, launched itself from the circle not at Wednesday, but straight at Naruto's face. Kagebunshin no Jutsu! There was a poof of smoke, and a clone appeared between Naruto and the creature, taking the full impact. The thing latched onto the clone's head, its twig-like limbs scrabbling. The clone grabbed it, wrestling with the squirming, shrieking mass. "Don't dispel it!" Wednesday commanded sharply. "Its physical form is unstable. Contain it! Compress it!" Naruto's mind, fueled by adrenaline, made the connection. Just like the big one. He willed his clone to grip the creature tightly. "Rasengan!" the clone yelled. But instead of a massive attack, it formed a tiny, hyperdense Rasengan in its palm, no bigger than a marble, and pressed it against the creature's core. The creature shrieked, its form blurring. Wednesday was there in an instant. She didn't use chakra. She spoke a single, guttural word that seemed to suck the sound from the room and plunged her hand, fingers rigid like a spear, into the center of the swirling energy. There was a sound like a pin dropping in a vast cathedral. The creature imploded. The clone vanished in the same instant. Where they had been, a single, perfectly smooth, black pebble fell to the floorboards with a soft tink. The chalk circle faded, its light gone. The oppressive cold lifted. The candle flames steadied, burning normally once more. Silence rushed back in, now ringing with absence. Naruto was panting, his hands on his knees. The whole encounter had lasted less than 15 seconds. Wednesday picked up the pebble, holding it up to the candlelight. It absorbed the light, giving nothing back. Fascinating, she whispered. A stabilized node of corrupted nature chakra. A data point. She looked at Naruto. Your Rasengan technique, when inversely applied, functions as a viable containment matrix. This is useful data. Naruto stared at the spot where the thing had been. Then at the pebble. Then at Wednesday's calm, intrigued face. The reality of his situation crashed down on him with the weight of a mountain. This wasn't a strange girl. This was a catalyst for unimaginable, terrifying weirdness. And he was stuck with her. Before he could say anything, there was a different knock at the door, a sharp, official rap rap rap. A voice, cool and masked, came from the hallway. Uzumaki. Umbu. Open up. We detected an unauthorized chakra fluctuation and a spiritual anomaly. The Hokage requests an immediate update. Naruto looked at the chalk-smudged floor, the candles, the jar with the beetle, the skull on the sill, and the pale, dark-eyed girl holding a pebble of pure darkness. He let out a long, slow breath that was half-groan, half-disbelieving laugh. Coming! He called, his voice slightly strangled. He looked at Wednesday. What do I tell them? The truth, she said, pocketing the pebble. It is always the most efficient lie. Omit the particulars of the ritual. State we were attacked by a minor residual entity. Which, she added, glancing at the floor, is technically correct. As Naruto shuffled to the door, his mind reeling, he realized one thing with crystal clarity. His life, already a chaotic swirl of ramen, dreams, and demon foxes, had just plunged headfirst into a new kind of madness. And the source of it was standing in the center of his living room, calmly blowing out the black candles, one by one. The adventure was no longer out in the forest. It was here, in his apartment. And it wore a black dress and twin braids. Chapter 2, The Council of Shadows and Sun. The knock that followed was not a request. It was a statement of authority, its staccato rhythm vibrating through the thin wood of Naruto's door like the tapping of a woodpecker on a coffin lid. Naruto scrambled, his eyes darting around the transformed apartment. The chalk circle smudged on the floorboards, the black candles still smoking, Wednesday standing perfectly still, the anomalous pebble now hidden in the folds of her dress. Just a second, he yelled, his voice cracking. He shot Wednesday a panicked look. What do we do? Answer it, she said, her tone implying he'd asked what to do with air. Deception is metabolically inefficient. Provide a curated subset of facts. She bent and, with a swift motion of her sleeve, smeared the most intricate central symbols of the chalk circle into an indistinct gray smear. The remaining pattern could have been a child's doodle or a bad attempt at a summoning array. It was plausibly deniable. Naruto took a deep, steadying breath that did nothing to steady him, and pulled the door open. 2A and BU stood in the dim hallway. They were monochrome ghosts in the night. One wore a dog mask, its snout elongated and menacing, the other a bird mask with a sharp, predatory beak. Their presence sucked the warmth from the doorway. Naruto could smell the faint, clean scent of oiled steel and ozone that always clung to them. Uzumaki. Dog mask intoned, his voice filtered and hollow. Unauthorized chakra emission and a Class C spiritual pressure spike were registered from this sector at 23:47 hours. Explain. Yeah? That was me. Training. Naruto blurted, giving a thumbs up and a too-wide grin. You know, gotta stay sharp for the Hokage, Databayo. Bird Mask's head tilted, the empty eye sockets of the mask focusing past Naruto into the apartment. His gaze swept over the candles, the skull, the jar, and came to rest on Wednesday, who had not moved. The non-registered entity, Bird stated. Step forward. Wednesday glided forward, stopping just behind Naruto's shoulder. She looked up at the towering, masked figures, her expression one of detached appraisal, as if they were exhibits in a museum of intimidation. I am Wednesday Addams. I am under the temporary guardianship of Naruto Uzumaki by order of the 5th Hokage. The chakra emission was a collaborative defensive measure. Against what? Dog Mask's hand rested lightly on the hilt of his tanto. A minor, semi-corporeal vermin, Wednesday replied. Approximately 0.3 meters in length, composed of aggregated biomass and residual psychic impression. It manifested near the ventilation shaft. She gestured vaguely toward the window. Uzumaki-san dispatched it with a containment technique. The spike was the entity's dissolution. Her delivery was so flat, so matter-of-fact, it carried a bizarre credibility. She offered no excuses, no fear, just a sterile report. The two A and BU exchanged a look, a slight tilt of heads that spoke volumes. You will both come with us, Dog Mask said. The Hokage wishes a debriefing. Immediately. Naruto's heart sank. Now? It's the middle of the night. The security of the village does not adhere to a sleep schedule, Bird Mask replied. Move! The Hokage's office at midnight was a different creature than its daytime self. The cheerful sunlight was gone, replaced by the cool, blue-white glow of few injector-powered lamps that hummed softly. The shadows were longer, deeper, pooling in the corners like spilled ink. Tsunade sat behind her desk, not in her formal robes, but in a simpler, dark yukata. Shizen stood at her side, looking weary but alert. To the right, leaning against a bookcase with his arms crossed, was Kakashi Hatake. He was mask on, headband down, but his single visible eye was sharp and awake. In a chair to the left, slouched as if trying to become one with the furniture, was Shikamaru Nara, suppressing a yawn. Troublesome. Shikamaru mumbled under his breath as Naruto and Wednesday were ushered in by the ANBU, who then took positions by the doors, melting into the shadows. Naruto. Miss Addams? Tsunade said, her voice devoid of its usual booming impatience. It was the voice of the medic Nin, assessing a tricky diagnosis. Sit. They sat in two hard chairs placed in the center of the room, facing the desk. Naruto felt like a bug under a magnifying glass. Wednesday sat with her spine not touching the back of the chair, hands folded in her lap. Start from the beginning, Tsunade commanded. And this time, I want details. Not shiny holes and shadow monsters. Precision. Naruto launched into a retelling, trying to stick to Wednesday's curated facts. The wrong turn in the forest, the cold clearing, the seam, the creature. He described Wednesday's injury and his decision to bring her back. He mentioned the knocking sounds in his apartment and the smaller creature's attack, glossing over the chalk circle as something Wednesday did to see what was out there. Throughout, the room was silent save for Naruto's voice. Kakashi's eye never left Wednesday. Shikamaru's lazy gaze grew progressively more focused. Tsunade's expression was granite. When Naruto finished, Tsunade turned to Wednesday. Your turn. Who are you really? And what is this breach? Wednesday met her gaze unflinchingly. My identity is as stated. My world operates on different metaphysical principles. What you call chakra, we classify as one spectrum of anima, or life force energy. My family specializes in the manipulation of its counterpart, the entropic, the still, the resonant echoes of endings, what we term the dark. The ritual I performed was a standard spectral eviction. A miscalculation, caused by an unexpected confluence of astral tides and a localized surge in your world's ambient anima, tore a temporary rift between our dimensions at a point of thin reality, your forest of death, which is saturated with death energy from constant predation. Shikamaru sat up a little. Astral tides? Confluence? You're talking about dimensional mechanics like it's meteorology. It is a science, Wednesday affirmed. Just one your village has not quantified. The rift, or seam, is unstable. It exists in a state of quantum ambiguity between our worlds. It emits a unique signature. That signature acts as a beacon, attracting entities that exist in the interstitial spaces, lost things, hungry things, things that feed on the energy of transition. The creature in the forest was one. The vermin in the apartment was another, smaller, drawn to the secondary resonance now clinging to Uzumaki and myself. Kakashi spoke, his tone deceptively casual. And this dark you manipulate. Can you demonstrate it? Without the chalk circles and candles. Wednesday considered for a moment. Then, she raised her right hand palm up. She didn't form seals. She didn't channel chakra. She simply focused. The air above her palm didn't grow hot or cold. Instead, it seemed to deaden. The faint hum of the office lights dulled. The subtle draft from the ventilation system stilled. In the center of her palm, a patch of darkness coalesced. It wasn't an object, it was an absence. A tiny, perfect hole in perception where light and sound seemed to fall into and vanish. It was profoundly unsettling to watch, like a localized sensory deprivation. Shizen gasped softly. Kakashi's eye narrowed. Shikamaru's eyebrows climbed his forehead. Tsunade leaned forward, her medic's mind racing. No chakra fluctuation at all, she murmured. It's not a jutsu. It's a negation. Wednesday closed her hand, and the effect vanished. The ambient sounds rushed back. It is a minor application. A focusing of intent upon the potential for silence. Fascinating, Shikamaru said, and he meant it. A energy system completely separate from chakra. That explains why you're invisible to sensory techniques. You're not hiding, you're operating on a different frequency. Troublesome, but logically consistent. The immediate problem, Tsunade said, steering the conversation back, is this beacon. You're saying that as long as this rift is open, and as long as you and Naruto are resonant with it, Konoha is at risk of attack from these interstitial things? Correct, Wednesday said. The attacks will escalate in scale and frequency as the rift stabilizes. It is a necrotic wound in reality. It will fester. A heavy silence descended. Naruto looked from face to face, seeing the grim understanding dawning. This wasn't just a weird girl, This was a village-level security crisis. Options? Tsunade asked the room. Shikamaru sighed, the sound full of cosmic weariness. Option 1. Isolate the resonant individuals, Naruto and Miss Addams, outside the village walls in a contained facility. Monitor the rift. Hope the attacks follow them and not the population center. High risk to them, moderate risk to the village if containment fails. No way! Naruto shot to his feet. I'm not being locked up, and we're not ditching her in some lab. Sit down, Naruto, Tsunade said, but her tone lacked heat. She was listening. Option 2, Shikamaru continued, is proactive. We attempt to close the rift from our side. This would require Miss Addams's expertise and likely a massive expenditure of chakra, possibly involving sealing masters or tailed beast energy. His eyes flicked to Naruto. It's the faster solution, but it carries the risk of catastrophic failure, widening the rift, triggering a chain reaction, or attracting something we can't handle during the attempt. Option 3, Kakashi drawled, his eye crinkling. We do nothing. Hope it goes away. Which it won't. So, not really an option. Before anyone could respond, a tremor passed through the room. It was subtle, a vibration in the floorboards, a faint rattle of the scrolls in their racks. Not an earthquake. It was a deep, subsonic thrum that passed through their bones more than their ears. Wednesday's head snapped toward the north window. A convergence, she said, her voice tight for the first time. Something larger has answered the call. Almost simultaneously, one of the ANBU by the door stiffened. Hokage-sama. Sensor Division reports a massive, anomalous chakra signature forming at the northern edge of the training grounds. It's coalescing. Not human. Not animal. Classification unknown. Tsunade was on her feet in an instant. Sound the alert. Level 2 containment. Mobilize barrier and tracking teams. Kakashi, Shikamaru, you're with me. Naruto, you and the girl stay here with Shizen. No! Naruto and Wednesday said in unison. They looked at each other, surprised. I am the cause and the specialist, Wednesday stated. My presence is required for analysis and potential countermeasures. My dark may be the only effective tool against such an entity. And I'm not letting my village fight something because of me while I sit in an office, Naruto yelled, his fists clenched. I brought her here. This is my fight too, Databeo. Tsunade's gaze drilled into them. She saw the stubborn fire in Naruto's eyes and the cold, unshakable logic in Wednesday's. She made a decision. Fine. But you stick to Kakashi like glue. You observe, you advise, you do not engage unless directly ordered. Is that clear? They both nodded. Move out. The northern training grounds were a vast, open space of beaten earth and scattered practice dummies, bordered by dense forest. Under the gibbous moon, it should have been still. It was not. In the center of the field, the air was rippling like water seen through heat haze. From the point of convergence, tendrils of sickly green and bruised purple energy were lashing out, digging into the earth, pulling up chunks of soil, rock, and the splintered remains of training posts. They were weaving together, forming a central mass. It was growing, pulse by pulse, a tumorous sculpture of corrupted nature. Around the perimeter, Konoha shinobi were taking positions. Barrier teams were already layering translucent domes of chakra around the phenomenon, not to contain it, it was too volatile, but to dampen its energy emissions and prevent collateral spread. Tsunade's group arrived on a rooftop overlooking the field. The scale of the thing was now apparent. It was over 3 stories tall, a shifting, multi-limbed horror. It had no clear shape. One moment it looked like a giant, malformed bear made of earth and thorns, the next like a writhing mass of root tentacles with glowing, pupilless eyes scattered across its surface. A sound emanated from it, a low, grinding roar undercut by a chorus of whispers that seemed to come from the ground itself. Report! Tsunade barked to a sensor neon on the roof. It's absorbing the natural chakra of the land, Hokage-sama. And it's incorporating inorganic matter. It's learning, adapting its structure. Jutsu attacks have limited effect, it just reforms. Kakashi pulled his forehead protector up. The Sharingan whirled to life, taking in the chaotic chakra flows. Its core is unstable, shifting. A standard attack would be like trying to stab smoke. Shikamaru's hands were already forming the ram seal, his shadow stretching out, probing. My shadow can't get a solid grip. It's too diffuse in parts, too solid in others. Troublesome. Wednesday stepped to the edge of the roof, her braids stirring in the unnatural wind blowing from the creature. Her eyes were wide, but not with fear. With a voracious, academic hunger. A Tier 3 amalgam, she diagnosed. A coalescence of interstitial forgotten spirits, amplified and given pseudocorporeal form by the raw, wild chakra of this location. It is a tantrum thrown by reality itself. How do we stop it? Tsunade demanded. You cannot stop chaos. You must redirect it, give it a shape that will collapse under its own instability. Wednesday's mind was racing, cross-referencing Addam's family lore with the data flooding her senses. It is drawn to strong, contrasting emotional signatures. Rage. Fear. Determination. Uzumaki is a beacon. So am I, but for the opposite polarity. Below, the creature, let's call it the amalgam, let out a shriek that shattered the remaining windows in a nearby storage shed. It had finished forming a crude, massive head. In the center of that head of packed earth and splintered wood, a single, giant eye cracked open, glowing with the same malevolent green as the seam. It scanned the perimeter, the whispering chorus rising in pitch, and fixed directly on their rooftop. On Naruto. It knew him. It's targeting the resonant signature, Wednesday shouted. The amalgam moved. It didn't walk, it flowed, surging across the training ground with terrifying speed for its size, a tidal wave of animated debris and hatred. Incoming! Kakashi yelled. All units, intercept! Tsunade roared, leaping from the roof, her fist already glowing with monstrous chakra. Chaos erupted. Fireballs and lightning strikes slammed into the amalgam, carving out chunks that instantly regrew. Earth walls erupted to slow it, only to be absorbed into its body, making it larger. Anbu flickered around it, striking with Fuma shuriken and explosive tags, which did little but irritate it. Tsunade landed in front of its path. You ugly piece of garden waste! Her fist connected with what passed for its knee. There was a sound like a mountain cracking. The entire limb exploded into a shower of dirt and rock. The amalgam stumbled, roared, and the debris swirled back, reattaching, the limb reforming thicker, studded with the sharp, broken ends of the training posts. It learns! Tsunade grunted, jumping back as a massive root limb smashed the ground where she'd been. On the roof, Naruto was vibrating with the need to act. Wednesday's hand shot out, cold fingers clamping around his wrist. Wait. Observe. Its core is mobile. It moves to the point of greatest resistance. See? Her voice was a rapid-fire analysis. When the Hokage struck the core, a dense knot of that green energy shifted from the center mass to the point of impact to facilitate reformation. It is reactive, not proactive. Kakashi's Sharingan was tracking the same thing. She's right. The core is the key. But it moves faster than any attack can land. We must bait it, Wednesday said. Lure the core to a predictable location and trap it. Uzumaki, you are the bait. Your chakra signature is its primary attractant. What? Naruto yelped. I will create the trap. My dark can impose stasis, a localized end to motion and energy. But I need it to hold still for 2.3 seconds. Shikamaru, his shadow still straining at the edges of the fight, looked at her. You can pin it? I can make a point in space forget how to be anything but still. But the focus is immense. I cannot also bait it. Naruto looked down at the battlefield, at the towering monster that was his fault, at his comrades risking their lives. He met Wednesday's dark, serious eyes. He saw no guarantee, only a calculated risk. It was the same look she'd given him in his apartment. Trust the logic. He grinned, a wild, fearless grin. All right. What's the plan, Wednesday? The plan was simple, insane, and required perfect timing. Naruto would launch himself at the amalgam, drawing its full attention and its core. He would use shadow clones as a distraction, feinting with Raisengans, making himself the loudest, brightest, most irritating target on the field. Meanwhile, Wednesday, under the cover of Shikamaru's shadow, which could hide her non-chakra signature, would get as close as possible. When the core moved to respond to Naruto's final, big attack, she would hit it with everything she had. They dropped from the roof. Kakashi went with Wednesday, providing physical protection. Shikamaru extended his shadow, creating a corridor of darkness for them to move through, skirting the edge of the battle. Naruto didn't hesitate. He sprinted straight into the fray, a blast of orange against the monochrome chaos. Hey! Pile of garbage! Over here! The amalgam's giant eye swiveled. The whispering chorus focused into a single, hate-filled hiss that seemed to say resonance. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu! A dozen Narutos poofed into existence. Let's go! They all charged, yelling, a whirlwind of orange. The amalgam swiped at them with limbs of stone and thorn. Clones popped in clouds of smoke. The real Naruto danced through the attacks, forming a Rasengan. Eat this! He slammed it into the creature's flank. Another crater, another instant reformation. But he saw it, a flash of concentrated green deep within the mass, zipping toward the impact point. It's working! He yelled, creating more clones, keeping up the pressure. On the sidelines, Wednesday and Kakashi moved like ghosts. Shikamaru's shadow jutsu was a masterpiece of misdirection, making them indistinct blurs. They stopped behind the shattered remains of a watchtower, 30 meters from the amalgam's left side. Wednesday knelt. She didn't draw a circle. She placed her palms flat on the ground. She closed her eyes. The world around her seemed to grow quiet, the sounds of battle muffled as if by thick glass. She began to draw upon the dark, not as a tool, but as a state of being. She focused on the concept of an end. The end of movement. The end of change. The final, perfect silence after the last note of a dirge. A faint, violet aura began to shimmer around her hands, leaching the color from the grass beneath her fingertips, turning it gray and brittle. Kakashi watched, his Sharingan seeing the impossible. The very natural energy around her was being negated, creating a passive zone of eerie stillness. On the field, Naruto was tiring. The amalgam was learning his patterns, its attacks becoming more precise. A whip-like root snagged his ankle, yanking him off his feet. He hit the ground hard, the wind knocked out of him. The amalgam loomed over him, its giant eye glowing with triumph. It raised a limb, a conglomerate of rock and sharpened wood, to crush him. Now, Naruto thought. He formed one last clone directly above him, between him and the crushing limb. Rasengan! The clone screamed, the whirling sphere blazing blue. The amalgam's core, sensing the threat to its primary target, flashed from within its body to the point of the crushing limb, pooling its energy to overpower the Rasengan and smash through. Wednesday's eyes snapped open. They were pools of absolute black, no white visible at all. She thrust her hands forward, not at the amalgam's body, but at the empty space between the body and the raised limb, the space where the core now resided. Tenebris statum, she intoned, her voice no longer her own, but a chorus of echoes from a deep well. A beam of pure, silent violet-black energy lanced from her hands. It didn't explode. It didn't burn. It arrived. And where it touched, the world stopped. The amalgam's crushing limb froze in midair. The swirling debris around its body halted, hanging motionless. The glowing green core, caught in the beam's center, was visible for all to see, a pulsating, cancerous heart of energy. It struggled, but the violet energy encased it, a shell of enforced stasis. The creature's main body, deprived of its animating core, shuddered and began to crumble, the earth and wood losing cohesion, raining down in a harmless cascade of dirt and splinters. Now, Naruto! Kakashi shouted. Naruto, from his back, didn't aim for the body. He aimed for the trapped, frozen core. With a guttural yell, he pushed the last of his chakra into his palm. Rasen Shuriken! The perfected futon, Rasen Shuriken, a whirling disk of countless microscopic wind blades, screamed across the short distance. It didn't hit a solid target. It hit a stasis field. The result was not an explosion, but an unraveling. The Rasen Shuriken's cutting edges met Wednesday's entropic stasis. The violent, chaotic life energy of the jutsu clashed with the absolute stillness of the dark. For a nanosecond, they annihilated each other in a silent, blinding flash of white and black. When the light faded, there was nothing. No core. No frozen limb. Just a perfectly spherical, 10-foot diameter patch of the training ground where the earth was smooth, glassy, and utterly, sterilely empty. The amalgam was gone, every last atom of it seemingly erased from existence. The silence that followed was deafening. Naruto lay on his back, panting, staring at the glassy crater. Wednesday slumped forward, Kakashi catching her before she face-planted. She was pale, blood trickling from her nose, her energy utterly spent. But her eyes, back to their normal obsidian, were fixed on the crater with a look of profound, almost religious satisfaction. Tsunade landed beside Naruto, helping him up. She looked at the crater, then at the exhausted, strange girl being supported by Kakashi. The evidence was irrefutable. Shikamaru walked up, looking from the crater to Wednesday. Well, he said, letting out a long, slow breath. That was terrifyingly effective. And completely outside any tactical manual ever written. Wednesday, her voice weak but clear, said, the methodology was sound. The variables were within acceptable tolerances. She looked at Naruto. Your timing was adequate. Naruto, despite the ache in every muscle, managed a wobbly grin. Adequate? It was perfect, Databeo. As the Mednin moved in to check on them and the cleanup began, Tsunade stood over the sterile crater. The immediate threat was gone. But the problem wasn't. This had been a scout, a probe. The rift was still open. And now, two of the most powerful, unpredictable forces in the village, the Jinchuriki of the Ninetales and this dimension-hopping, entropy-wielding prodigy, were not just a problem. They were somehow a team. She looked at them, Naruto, laughing through his pain, and Wednesday, quietly accepting a hydration pill from Shizen with a nod of thanks. A sun and a shadow. An unstoppable force and an immovable, morbid object. The council meeting was over. The real work was just beginning. And Tsunade had the distinct, unsettling feeling that the rules of her world had just been permanently rewritten. Chapter 3: A Curriculum in Chaos. The scent of chalk dust, old wood, and the faint, underlying aroma of adolescent sweat was one Irika Yumino knew intimately. It was the smell of the Ninja Academy, of potential and panic in equal measure. Today, however, a new note had been introduced, a dry, cold scent, like fallen leaves in a deep forest, that seemed to emanate from the girl sitting in the back row. Wednesday Addams, clad in her immutable black dress amidst a sea of Konoha's muted blues, greens, and occasional flashes of clan-specific colors, was a study in stillness. The order from the Hokage was clear. Cultural integration. For Wednesday, it was a forensic dissection of a foreign society's training methodology. For the academy, it was like introducing a black hole into a physics lesson. Irika, ever the professional, smiled his best. Welcoming but authoritative smile. Class, we have a special observer joining us today. This is Wednesday Addams. She's here to learn about our shinobi ways. Please make her feel welcome. A few polite murmurs. Naruto, sitting 2 rows ahead of Wednesday, gave an enthusiastic thumbs up that she acknowledged with a slow, deliberate blink. The first lesson was ninjutsu theory. Irika began explaining the fundamental principle of molding chakra, the mix of physical and spiritual energy. It's the fuel for all our techniques, he said, drawing a simple diagram on the board. Wednesday's hand rose, not with eagerness, but with the mechanical precision of a trap being sprung. Yes, Miss Addams? Instructor Yumino. Your chakra model is predicated on a binary internal synthesis. Have you considered the tertiary influence of ambient environmental entropy on the stability of the molded form? A technique performed in a graveyard at midnight would logically have a different decay rate than one performed in a sunlit field, independent of the user's skill, due to the differential in background entropic pressure. The classroom was silent. Shikamaru Nara, who was slouching in his seat looking profoundly bored, cracked one eye open. Irika's smile remained frozen. That's a very advanced thought, Miss Addams. We generally focus on internal control first. Environmental factors come later, with field experience. An inefficient pedagogical structure, Wednesday noted, making a mark in a small, black-bound notebook. You build the house before surveying the landslide zone. Next was taijutsu in the training yard. The class paired off for basic sparring drills. Wednesday was paired with Sakura Harino, who was still processing the bizarre events of the northern training grounds, approached with cautious politeness. Okay, just a basic exchange, block and counter, alright? Sakura said, settling into a standard academy stance. Wednesday assumed no recognizable stance. She simply stood, hands at her sides, her weight perfectly centered. She looked less like a fighter and more like a monument waiting for a pigeon. You should get ready, Sakura prompted. I am assessing your kinetic tells, Wednesday replied. You favor your left leg by a margin of 3% when shifting from defensive to offensive posture. Your right shoulder tenses 0.5 seconds before you commit to a jab. It is a micro-expression of anticipated force. Psychologically fascinating. Sakura blinked, thrown. It is? Motivated by a desire to just do the exercise, Sakura lunged forward with a textbook straight punch, pulling her power significantly. Wednesday didn't block. She didn't dodge. She tilted her head slightly to the right, letting the fist whistle past her ear by a millimeter. At the same time, her left foot shot out, not to kick, but to hook behind Sakura's advancing left ankle. It was a move of pure, unembellished physics, leveraging Sakura's own momentum. Sakura yelped as her legs were swept out from under her. She hit the training ground dirt with a soft thud, more surprised than hurt. Wednesday looked down at her. Your commitment to linear attack vectors is commendably predictable. A more chaotic opponent would have exploited the 42-degree opening you presented in your lower ribcage during the lunge. Sakura lay on the ground, staring up at the impassive face framed by twin braids. It wasn't arrogance. It was an audit. She felt like a flawed equation that had just been politely solved. Thanks, Sakura said, accepting Wednesday's offered hand. The girl's grip was cool and dry. The real spectacle came during survival techniques. The lesson was on basic trap detection and disarming. The instructor had set up a simple tripwire connected to a bucket of harmless, dyed water. The key, the instructor said, is careful observation of the environment. Look for inconsistencies in the foliage, unnatural tension in the wire. Wednesday walked up to the demonstration area. She didn't look at the tripwire. She knelt and pressed her palm to the ground several feet away from it. She closed her eyes for a moment. The soil composition is inconsistent, she announced. A finer, drier silt has been recently added here. She pointed to a spot. And here to mask the depressions left by the instructor's feet when he set the device. Furthermore, the auditory profile is wrong. The wind through the leaves to the east is being slightly dampened by the canvas of the water bucket, which is not properly acoustically integrated with the surrounding bamboo. The trap is not the wire. The wire is the misdirection. The actual trigger is a pressure-sensitive plate buried 6 inches beneath the secondary silt deposit, designed to activate if someone attempts to cautiously step over the obvious wire. She stood up, dusting off her hands. The instructor's jaw was slightly agape. The trap was, in fact, a double-layered one he used for advanced students. How? He managed. Logic, Wednesday said. And an understanding of human psychology. The desire to avoid the obvious danger often leads directly to the concealed one. It's the principle behind the classic poison bouquet or smiling assassin. Elementary. She walked back to the stunned class. Shino Abiram, who had been observing from the periphery, fell into step beside her. The faint buzzing from his hive was a quiet hum. Your method of analysis is highly systematic, Shino said, his voice muffled by his high collar. You process multiple sensory streams simultaneously. It is akin to how my Kikaicha perceive the world through vibrational and chemical feedback. Wednesday looked at him, a flicker of genuine interest in her eyes. Insects are among nature's most efficient decomposers. Their life cycle is a beautiful, relentless march from complexity to simplicity. Do you direct their processes, or do you merely provide a habitat for their inherent appetites? A symbiotic relationship, Shino clarified. I guide. They act. Their appetites are focused. A commendable partnership. More honest than the sentiment-laden bonds others form with larger, needier creatures. For the first time in recorded Academy history, Shino Abiram seemed to be having a pleasant conversation. The final lesson of the day was Genjutsu. The basics of casting and breaking illusions. The instructor performed a simple, false surroundings technique, making the classroom appear to be filled with fluttering, harmless butterflies. Most students blinked, shook their heads, and concentrated to dispel it. Naruto, as always, struggled, grimacing as the butterflies swarmed his face. Wednesday watched the colorful illusion with an expression of profound distaste. A garish imposition upon subjective reality, she stated aloud. Crude. The instructor, a specialist in illusionary arts, frowned. Genjutsu is a subtle and powerful tool, Miss Addams. It attacks the mind. It is a parlor trick compared to a properly cultivated internal horror, Wednesday countered. You inject a foreign image. True psychological warfare involves finding the latent fear within a subject and providing it the barest suggestion, the slightest nudge, to metastasize on its own. The mind's own creations are always more vivid and damaging than any external projection. She turned her gaze to the instructor. For example, you have a recurring anxiety about forgetting your anniversary. The scent of lilacs, your wife's favorite flower, now triggers a cold sweat you cannot explain. A true artist would use that, not a swarm of cartoon insects. The instructor paled. The butterfly illusion flickered and died. The room was utterly silent. How could she know that? It was at that moment that the surprise field exercise was called. An alarm bell rang, a simulated village emergency. All students were to report to Training Ground 3 for an impromptu survival and tactics drill. Teams were scrambled. By chance, or perhaps by the mischievous hand of a certain copy ninja watching from the trees, Naruto, Wednesday, and a quiet, nervous genin from the rain village named Taro were grouped together. Their objective, retrieve a scroll from a designated, enemy outpost, a guarded wooden tower, and return to the start point. Taro, eager to prove himself, took point. I've got this. My team in rain specializes in water-based infiltration. They approached a small stream that bordered the training ground. Watch. I can create a diversion with water clones to draw the guards' attention. He formed hand seals. Suiton, Mizu Bunshin no Jutsu. 2 shimmering copies of himself rose from the stream and charged noisily toward the tower's front. 2 Chunin, guards, stationed at the tower engaged the clones. Now! Taro whispered, gesturing for Naruto and Wednesday to follow him across the stream and around the back. They had taken 3 steps when a third guard, hidden in the tree line, dropped down behind them. Not bad, kids, the Chunin said with a grin. But you forgot to check for the rear sentry. You're caught. Taro's shoulders slumped. Naruto gritted his teeth, ready to fight. Wednesday, however, was looking at the stream, then at the water clones still fighting near the tower. The chemical signature is wrong, she murmured. What? Taro asked. Your clones. They are composed of pure H2O drawn from the stream. But this stream runs through limestone deposits. Its natural pH is approximately 8.2, alkaline. The water in the clones, once separated from the main body and exposed to the carbon dioxide in the air, should begin absorbing it, forming carbonic acid, lowering the pH. Yet their structural integrity remains constant. Therefore, they are being actively maintained by a continuous, low-level chakra link from you, correct? Taro stared, confused. Well, yes. To keep them stable. And that chakra link is a filament of energy, traceable back to the caster. The hidden Chunin guard's grin faded. Hey, that's theory crafting. In the field. Wednesday interrupted him, speaking to Taro. Can you alter the chakra you feed them? Not the amount, but the resonance? Make it chaotic, disruptive to the water's hydrogen bonds? I guess? It would be unstable, but... Do it. Now. For precisely 3 seconds. Baffled but seeing no other option, Taro focused. He flared his chakra, sending a pulse of deliberately jagged, discordant energy down the invisible link to his clones. At the tower, the 2 water clones didn't pop. They melted. Their forms lost cohesion, not vanishing in smoke, but slumping into puddles that then began to violently fizz and bubble, emitting a faint, acrid smell. The 2 guards at the tower, momentarily distracted by the bizarre chemical reaction, turned their backs on the stream. The auditory and olfactory distraction is now superior, Wednesday stated. Proceed. She didn't wait. She walked straight past the stunned rear sentry, who was too busy processing the phrase hydrogen bonds to react, and waded directly across the stream, heading for the now unobserved side of the tower. Naruto and Taro scrambled after her. They reached the tower wall. The scroll was on the 2nd floor. I'll boost you up, Naruto said, forming a platform with his hands. Unnecessary, Wednesday said. She examined the wooden wall. It was made of rough-hewn logs. She pointed to a specific spot. This timber has advanced dry rot. Its structural integrity is compromised by the mycelial network of Serpula lacrimens. A focused impact here will create minimal noise and maximum access. Naruto looked at the spot. He saw nothing but wood. But he trusted her weirdness. He formed a tiny, pinpoint Rasengan, a feat of control he'd only recently begun to master, and pressed it against the spot she indicated. The wood didn't splinter. It powdered silently, creating a hole just large enough to climb through. They retrieved the scroll without further incident. Back at the start point, the Chunin instructor debriefing them was the same one from the tower. He looked at their retrieved scroll, then at the still fizzing puddle near his post, then at Wednesday. You used chemistry, he said accusingly. I used available data, Wednesday corrected. The environment is not a backdrop. It is a toolkit. Your water clone technique is not merely a diversion, it is a potential vector for chemical warfare, sonic disruption via cavitation, or thermal transfer. You limit its application to the literal. It is intellectually indolent. The Chunin opened and closed his mouth, having no military response to being called intellectually indolent by a 16-year-old in a pinafore. As they were dismissed, Sakura approached Wednesday, her earlier caution replaced by a reluctant curiosity. That was really clever. The thing with the water clones. It was basic applied hydrodynamics and psychology, Wednesday said, packing her black notebook. Your medical studies are more intellectually rigorous, I assume. The human body is a more complex system than a stream. Sakura brightened slightly. It is. I'm studying under Lady Tsunade. There's so much to learn about chakra pathways, cellular regeneration, poison antidotes. Poison antidotes, Wednesday repeated, the word tasting of interest. A race between the agent of decay and the artificer of resilience. The most intimate form of conflict. I have a treatise written by my great-aunt Calpurnia on the aesthetic merits of various neurotoxins. They are like sonnets, each with a unique cadence of paralysis. Sakura's smile froze. I mostly focus on the antidote part. A regrettable emphasis on the denouement. The beauty is in the progression of symptoms. Wednesday looked at Sakura's horrified but fascinated expression. Perhaps we could exchange texts. Your medical scrolls for my toxicological primers. A cross-disciplinary study. It was, in Wednesday Addam's terms, an overture of friendship. Sakura, after a moment's internal struggle between her healer's heart and her scholar's brain, nodded slowly. Okay. But maybe start with the less poetic ones? As they walked away from the training ground, Naruto fell into step beside Wednesday. The sun was setting, casting long, orange shadows that mirrored his jumpsuit. So, what did you think of the academy? Wednesday considered. The curriculum is emotionally driven and aesthetically bland. The emphasis on conformity stifles innovation. However, she conceded, the practical applications of your chakra are versatile. And Shino Aburaim's discourse on coleoptera in sociology was stimulating. Naruto laughed, the sound echoing in the quieting street. Stimulating. Right. He shoved his hands in his pockets. You know, for someone who thinks everything's boring, You sure made today the least boring day at the academy ever. I did not set out to entertain. I know. That's what makes it awesome, Databeo. He grinned at her. You're not trying to be weird. You just are. It's honest. Wednesday looked at his grinning face, illuminated by the dying sun. She found the expression biologically excessive, a wasteful expenditure of muscular energy. Yet, the sentiment behind it, the appreciation for her unvarnished, unapologetic nature, was a novel data point. No one in her family would call her honest. They took her darkness for granted. Naruto saw it, acknowledged its strangeness, and accepted it as a strength. It was illogical. It was inefficient. It was, she decided, not entirely unpleasant. Your academy's lunch offering was a pork cutlet bowl, she stated as they turned onto his street. The meat was overcooked, the breading sodden with grease, and the presentation lacked any semblance of artistry. Tomorrow, I will prepare a packed lunch. You will be my control subject for a comparison of nutritional efficiency and meal satisfaction. Naruto's stomach growled in anticipation, even as his brain warned him of preserved beetles and gray eggs. Sure. Can't be worse than the cafeteria, right? Wednesday gave him a look that suggested the universe held far worse things than soggy tonkatsu. We shall see. That night, back in the candlelit, skull-adorned apartment, Wednesday opened her notebook. She wrote in precise, spidery script. Observation Day 1, Konoha Educational System. Prioritizes communal bonding and standardized output over individual aptitude. Flawed, but produces a resilient, if predictable, product. Notable exceptions: Nara, Shikamaru, strategic indolence. Aburame, Shino, symbiotic pragmatism. Haruno, Sakura, latent capacity for morbid scholarship. Uzumaki, Naruto. She paused, the nib of her pen hovering over the page. The candle flame guttered, casting a dancing shadow. Uzumaki, Naruto, anomaly. Output is chaotic, input is hardship and rejection. Yet conversion efficiency is paradoxically high. Generates immense energy not from conformity, but from defiance of entropy's pull, a personal, ongoing Big Bang. Scientifically fascinating. Aesthetically, loud. She closed the book. Outside, the familiar soft thump, thump of the dimensional knocking had returned, a little stronger, a little closer than the night before. It was a reminder that her academic observations were not merely intellectual. The final exam for this strange, vibrant, garish village was coming. And it would not be on a chalkboard. She blew out the candle, plunging the room into a darkness that felt, for the first time, not quite absolute. The faint, orange glow of Konoha's streetlights bled around the edges of the curtain, an insistent, warm presence against her perfect dark. It was, she thought, troublesome. Next. Chapter 4, The Fox and the Raven. The sewer was eternal. The drip of stagnant water, the smell of damp concrete and something older, more feral, was a constant in Naruto's subconscious. The massive, barred gate at the end of the walkway was the focal point of his inner world, and behind it, a presence of simmering, volcanic hatred. Kurama, the nine-tailed fox, usually spent his time in a state of low-grade fury, radiating malice like a furnace. Tonight, however, the malice was tinged with curiosity. A new scent had woven itself into the fabric of Naruto's mindscape. It wasn't the electric ozone of the Uchiha brat, the clinical green of the medic girl, or the boisterous, sunny chakra of Naruto himself. This was cold, dry, and quiet. A scent of old books, grave soil, and the stillness after a scream. It was the scent of the girl. The Addams. For the first time in years, one of Naruto's eyes opened within the mindscape. He materialized on the walkway, looking up at the cage. Hey, furball. You've been quiet. Humph. Kurama's voice rumbled, shaking the very water underfoot. Your mind has acquired a parasite. A cold, chittering thing. It grates on my senses. Naruto frowned. Wednesday's not a parasite. She's a guest. A weird, scary guest. She perceives me. Kurama growled, a note of something other than anger in his tone, surprise. Not as a weapon. Not as a monster to be feared or a power to be coveted. She listens to the silence between my hatred. It is disconcerting. In the physical world, Naruto lay asleep on his futon. Wednesday, in her now customary meditation circle in the center of the room, was not asleep. Her consciousness was a focused beam, and the constant, oppressive presence of the beast within her guardian was the loudest silence in Konoha. It called to her own affinity for the deep and the dark. So, she did what any Addams would do when confronted with a fascinating existential phenomenon: she knocked. Not with chakra. With a focused pulse of her own dark, a polite, concise tap on the metaphysical door of Naruto's subconscious. In the mindscape, Naruto jumped as a new section of the sewer wall, previously featureless concrete, shimmered and resolved into a heavy, oak door with iron rivets. It looked like the entrance to a particularly grim library. "What the?" Naruto muttered. The door swung open silently. Wednesday Addams stepped through, her form not a chakra construct, but a projection of pure will. She looked exactly as she did in reality, her black dress stark against the grimy yellows and greens of the sewer. She didn't look at Naruto. Her obsidian eyes were fixed on the colossal fox behind the bars. She walked to the edge of the water, stopping where the walkway met the pooled filth. She looked up, and up, at the mountain of red fur and malice. "You dare intrude here, little ghost?" Kurama's voice was a physical force, meant to shatter sanity. Wednesday's braids didn't even flutter. "Your volume is impressive but inefficient as a communication tool," she stated, her voice echoing clearly in the vast space. "I am Wednesday Addams. I have come to observe." "Observe? I am not a spectacle for your macabre amusement." A wave of killing intent, thick enough to drown in, rolled over her. Naruto cried out, falling to one knee. Wednesday simply stood there. The killing intent washed over her like a foul wind, but it didn't touch the core of chill stillness within her. Amusement is a trivial human emotion. This is academic. You are a being of pure, concentrated life force and hatred sealed within a human vessel. A forced symbiosis. I am a practitioner of the entropic arts, which exist in opposition to chaotic life force. Our coexistence in this space is a unique thermodynamic paradox. I am here to study the friction. Kurama fell silent. One giant, slit-pupiled eye, the size of a house, peered down at the tiny, pale figure. The rage didn't vanish, but it banked, replaced by a wary, ancient intelligence. "You do not fear me." "Fear is a response to the unknown or to a perceived threat to one's continuity," Wednesday replied, her hands clasped behind her back as if lecturing. "I am well acquainted with the aesthetics of annihilation. And you, for all your power, are not a threat to me. You are bound. Your hatred is a reaction to your bondage, a feedback loop of magnificent, tragic predictability. It is, in its own way, beautiful. Like a perfectly contained star, burning itself out against its own cage." Naruto stared from his knees, his mind reeling. No one talked to Kurama like this. No one could. A low, grinding sound echoed, the sound of Kurama's shifting, chains of chakra clinking. "Beautiful?" The word was a foreign, rusty thing in his mouth. "You are as mad as the rest of them." "Quite possibly," Wednesday agreed. "But my madness has a methodology. Yours is a raw, unprocessed condition. You hate humans for sealing you. You hate the boy for being your jailer. You hate the world for existing while you are trapped. It is a simplistic, one-note symphony. With your lifespan and perspective, you could compose operas of despair, concertos of world-ending melancholy. Instead, you snarl. It is undignified. You presume to lecture me, mortal?" The roar was back, but it lacked its earlier totality. There was a hint of offense. "I am analyzing an underperforming asset. Your potential for cosmic horror is being squandered on petulant tantrums." She took a step closer, peering at the intricate seal on the massive gate. "The craftsmanship of your prison is elegant. A spiral of compelling complexity. It does not merely lock you in, it turns your own energy against you, using it to reinforce the bars. The ultimate irony. Your rage is the mortar that holds your bricks in place." Kurama was silent for a long moment. The dripping water was the only sound. "You see much, little ghost." "I see what is there. You and Naruto are two halves of a broken system. He draws on your power in moments of emotional extremis, amplifying the chaos. You feed on his negative emotions, amplifying the hatred. It is a perfect, dysfunctional circuit. You are both the battery and the drain for each other." Naruto finally found his voice. "Hey! We're not that bad. We've come to an understanding." Wednesday glanced at him. "Your understanding is an emotional truce built on shared trauma and grudging respect. It is not a solution. It is a temporary ceasefire in a civil war you are both fighting within a single body." She turned back to Kurama. "Have you ever considered collaboration?" The very air in the mindscape seemed to freeze. Collaboration. With a human. The word was a curse. With a consciousness that shares your space. Your goals are misaligned, but your fates are conjoined. He wishes to protect a village. You wish to be free. These are not mutually exclusive in the long arc of history. He will die in a mere century. You will remain. Strategic patience, paired with directed effort rather than undirected rage, could serve both your interests. "You suggest I help him?" Kurama's voice was dangerously soft. "I suggest you view him not as a jailer, but as a conduit. A lens through which your power can be focused with precision, rather than exploded with waste. He is learning to shape your chakra into finer and finer tools. Each time he does so without losing himself to your hatred, he proves the seal can be a partnership, Not just a prison. Every controlled Raisin shuriken is an argument for your eventual, negotiated release. Naruto's jaw was on the floor. He'd never thought of it that way. Every time he used Kurama's power without the red cloak of rage, he was proving something? Kurama let out a breath that was like a hot, sulphurous wind. You speak of negotiations with a race that knows only fear and greed. I speak of logic with a being old enough to appreciate it. The boy is an outlier. He defies his race's baser instincts. He seeks to earn trust, not command it. He is, in his own garish way, attempting to build a world where a creature like you might not need to be feared. A naive, impossible goal. But the striving toward it is a data point you should not ignore. She turned to leave, then paused. Your silence has a different quality than the void I cultivate. Yours is a silence of anticipation, of pent-up force. Mine is a silence of conclusion, of things settled. We are, in essence, opposite ends of the same spectrum. It has been illuminating. She walked back to the oak door. As she reached for the handle, Kurama spoke again, his voice now devoid of roaring, just a deep, ancient rumble. Little ghost. Your world. This dark you wield. It is the silence after the scream? Wednesday looked back, a faint, almost imperceptible tilt to her head. It is the acknowledgement that the scream, however loud, is temporary. The silence is what remains. It is the truth. And with that, she opened the door and was gone. The oak door faded back into seamless concrete. The mindscape was silent again, but the silence was different. The ever-present hum of hatred was still there, but it was thoughtful. Naruto slowly got to his feet. Wow. She is unsettling, Kurama grumbled, but he lay down, resting his massive head on his paws, one eye still open and fixed on the spot where Wednesday had stood. But she is not wrong. The impact of that visit manifested in the physical world gradually, subtly. A few days later, Naruto was in a remote training ground, pushing himself to master a new variation of the Rasengan. He was tired, frustrated. The sphere of chakra in his hand kept destabilizing, sputtering out. Come on, he growled, sweat stinging his eyes. Just hold together, Databeo. The frustration sparked a familiar heat in his gut. A flicker of red chakra, corrosive and angry, seeped from his pores. It was the first step toward the loss of control, toward the fox's rage taking over. Undignified. The word echoed in his mind, not in his own voice, and not in Kurama's roar. It was Wednesday's flat, clinical tone. A snarl when you could compose a concerto. The red chakra faltered. The heat didn't vanish, but it changed. It was no longer a wildfire threatening to consume him. It became a focus-forged fire. Naruto's breathing, which had been ragged, slowed. He didn't fight the fox's energy. He didn't embrace it with blind rage. He acknowledged it. A vast, available power source. A violent, chaotic river. And he needed to build a very specific, delicate water wheel. He focused not on his anger, but on the shape he needed. The perfect, stable sphere. He imagined Wednesday's critique of inefficiency, of wasted potential. The red chakra, instead of coating him, was drawn into the spinning vortex in his palm. It wasn't a merger of wills, it was a cold, deliberate use of a resource. The sputtering blue Rasengan stabilized. Then, it began to darken at its core, tinged with a deep, volcanic orange red. It didn't grow wildly in size or power. It grew denser. The sound changed from a high-pitched whir to a deeper, more ominous thrum, like the heartbeat of a mountain. He held it. A Rasengan infused with a thread of Kurama's chakra, not as a cloak of rage, but as a focused power core. He released it at a training post. The impact wasn't a colossal explosion. The post didn't shatter into splinters. It vaporized from the point of contact upward, leaving only a smoldering, glass-smooth stump. The force was so concentrated, so utterly efficient, there was almost no collateral damage. Naruto stared at his hand, then at the annihilated post. He hadn't felt the usual rush of manic power, followed by guilt and exhaustion. He felt, in control. Precise. Strategic patience, directed effort. Wednesday's words, spoken to the fox, now made a different kind of sense to him. Do not get accustomed to it, boy. Kurama's voice grumbled in his mind, but it lacked its usual venom. That was a drop. A sip. And it was merely less wasteful. It was the closest thing to approval Naruto had ever received from the beast. The true test came not in training, but from the outside. The graveyard of worlds was not idle. The closure of the amalgam had been a setback, not a defeat. Smaller incursions began, not massive creatures, but insidious, psychic leaks. A week after the Mindscape visit, Team 7, reconstituted temporarily with Wednesday as a tactical observer, was investigating disappearances in the Western Merchant District. People reported feeling an overwhelming sense of dread near a particular alleyway, followed by gaps in memory. They found the source, not a creature, but a place. A section of the brick alley wall had become a porous membrane to the interstitial dimension. It was weeping an invisible mist of despair, a passive-aggressive horror that sapped will and induced catatonia. Sakura, as the medic, was trying to assess a victim, a merchant who sat slumped against the opposite wall, eyes wide and unseeing, whispering about the crawling in the corners. Kakashi's Sharingan could see the distortion, a greasy smear on reality, but couldn't affect it. Naruto's Rasengan would just destroy the wall, potentially widening the breach. Wednesday examined the weeping wall. She placed a hand on the bricks. They were cold, unnaturally so, and slightly damp with a condensation that wasn't water. It's an emotional echo-given pseudo-substance, she diagnosed. A sentiment seepage. Direct force is ineffective. You must counter the emotion. How do you fight a feeling? Sakura asked, her voice tight with frustration. With its antithesis, Wednesday said. She looked at Naruto. This is despair. Apathy. The slow surrender. Its opposite is not joy. Joy would be consumed. Its opposite is relentless, stubborn, defiant action. A will that refuses to acknowledge futility. She turned to him fully. Your specialty. You must push your chakra, your will, into the breach. Not as an attack, but as an assertion of existence. A declaration that this place, here and now, is alive and will not be quieted. Naruto understood. It was the same principle as facing down Kurama hatred, or the village's scorn. He didn't fight the feeling, he stood in spite of it. He walked up to the weeping wall. The sense of dread was palpable, a physical weight trying to press him to his knees, to silence his heart. He remembered every lonely night, every hateful glance, every time he'd been told he was nothing. He remembered choosing to smile anyway. To yell his dream anyway. To get up again, and again, and again. He placed his palm flat against the cold, damp brick, right over the heart of the distortion. He didn't form a Rasengan. He simply pushed. He pushed not with raw power, but with the sheer, unconquerable force of Naruto Uzumaki. His chakra, always so bright and warm, flooded into the wall. It wasn't a blast, it was a tide. A tide of unwavering determination, of a promise to never give up, of a belief in bonds and a future so bright it was blinding. The greasy distortion in Kakashi's Sharingan vision recoiled. The whispering from the victim stuttered. The cold lessened. But it wasn't enough. The despair was ancient deep. It began to swallow his bright chakra, to twist it, to try and turn his own hope into a source of deeper despair, the tragedy of hope unmet. Naruto gritted his teeth. He felt the darkness trying to pull him down. He reached for more power, and the familiar, red heat answered in his gut. No, he thought, not this time. Not rage. Partnership. He didn't let the rage out. He visualized the vast, dark reservoir of Kurama's power. And he asked? Not demanded. Asked? Inside the mindscape, behind the great gate, Kurama watched. He saw the boy struggling, not with brute force, but with a will as stubborn as his own. He saw the Addam's girl's words. A lens through which your power can be focused with precision. TCH, fine. A thread of power, pure and immense, not tinged with the usual hatred, flowed through the seal. It was still destructive, still chaotic in nature, but its intent was clear, reinforcement. It reached Naruto. He didn't let it mix with his own chakra. He kept them separate, a brilliant, defiant gold and a deep, potent crimson. He wove them together not as a blend, but as a braid. The unyielding will and the indomitable force. He pushed again. The braided energy struck the despair seepage. It did not purify it with light. It did not destroy it with darkness. It unmade it with a combination of both. The relentless, active will refused its stillness. The immense, primal force denied its existence. With a sound like a sigh, the weeping stopped. The wall was just a wall again, cold but ordinary. The merchant slumped, unconscious but breathing easily. The oppressive dread vanished, replaced by the normal, grimy atmosphere of an alley. Naruto stumbled back, panting, his palms smoking slightly. He looked at it, then at the wall. He'd done it. He'd used the fox's power, not as a last resort of anger, but as a first resort of strategy. And Kurama had complied? Wednesday walked over to the wall, touching it. Residual entropy normalized. The breach is sealed. She looked at Naruto. You utilized the dichotomy. Life force and anti-life force in coordinated opposition. A elegant solution. Sakura was checking the merchant's pulse, her eyes wide. Naruto, your chakra felt different. Kakashi's visible eye was crinkled in a smile. Interesting teamwork, he said, his gaze lingering on Naruto. All kinds of teamwork. That night, back in the apartment, the knocking was quieter, further away. Naruto lay in the dark, feeling a new kind of quiet inside himself. The usual turbulent ocean of his chakra and the smoldering volcano of the fox's presence were still there, but there was a understanding. A thin, fragile bridge across the abyss, built of logic, necessity, and the unsettling mediation of a girl who saw monsters as misunderstood artists. In her meditation circle, Wednesday felt the shift in the apartment's psychic atmosphere. The two warring silences, the fox's anticipatory rage and the boy's defiant noise, had found a precarious, resonant harmony. It was not peace. It was a more efficient form of conflict. She allowed herself a small, private thought. Progress. The fox and the sun were learning to dance. And she, the conductor of silence, had provided the sheet music. The symphony of Konoha's defense was becoming increasingly strange, and increasingly potent. Next. Chapter 5, The Addams Family Jutsu. Konoha's morning was a symphony of cheerful dissonance that grated against Wednesday's nerves like a rusty saw. The smell of baking bread from Akimichi bakeries, the shouts of shopkeepers hawking their wares, the laughter of children, it was a relentless assault on her preference for funereal stillness. She stood on the balcony of Naruto's apartment, which she had repurposed as an atmospheric observation post, watching the village awaken with the clinical detachment of a biologist observing a hyperactive colony of ants. Her resources were limited. Her own, dark, was potent but required immense focus for large-scale applications. Naruto's chakra was a brute force instrument. Against the nuanced, creeping horror seeping from the dimensional rift, they needed subtler tools. Scalpels, not sledgehammers. She needed to craft her own jutsu, techniques born of Addam's family ingenuity and Konoha's unique energetic physics. Her opportunity arrived in the form of a disoriented raven. It was a large, glossy bird with eyes that held an unnatural intelligence. It circled the balcony 3 times before landing on the rail with a clumsy thud, a small, oilskin-wrapped parcel clutched in its talons. It looked at Wednesday, gave a croak that sounded like nevermore, though that may have been her hopeful interpretation, and promptly fell over, unconscious from dimensional fatigue. Wednesday untied the parcel. The raven would recover. It was of hardier Addam stock. The package contained 3 items, each more wonderfully macabre than the last. 1. A small, crystal vial containing a viscous, iridescent black liquid labeled in her mother's elegant script. Grandmama's potion of temporal stasis, for when you need a moment to appreciate the carnage. External application only. Do not ingest unless seeking a very permanent vacation. 2. A set of blueprint scrolls on strangely thick, leathery parchment, covered in Uncle Fester's chaotic scrawl and dramatic diagrams, asterisk. Cerebral dampener MK. 3. Disrupts those pesky reality filters others call senses. Induces mild dissociation, vertigo, and a profound questioning of one's life choices. Now with 20% more psychic feedback. Asterisk. 3. A letter from her father, Gomez, on perfumed black stationery. My dearest Scorpion. Your mother's crying basin showed us glimpses of your predicament. A world of vibrant, shouting people who use internal energy to throw fire. How wonderfully barbaric. We are beside ourselves with envy. Morticia has taken to practicing her knife throwing by aiming at sunbeams, sighing about your absence. We send what aid we can across the gulf between worlds. Grandmama's potion will stop anything biological in its tracks. Think of it as a pause button for mortality. Fester's contraption is unorthodox, but it should interfere with any mental manipulation techniques you might encounter. Remember the Addams family credo, sic gorgiamus alus subjectatos nunc, we gladly feast on those who would subdue us. P.S. Your mother says to send a lock of your enemy's hair for the family tapestry. We're starting a new section, Wednesday's Conquests. All our love, which is as deep and dark as a well at midnight. Papa. Wednesday felt a rare, warm flicker in her chest, quickly filed away for later analysis. The tools were perfect. Now, she needed to adapt them. Her laboratory became a corner of Naruto's living room, now curtained off with black fabric. Using basic supplies, acquired from Konoha's market, and funded by Naruto's rapidly depleting savings, she began her work. The potion of temporal stasis was the easiest to adapt. Its effect was purely biochemical, creating a localized field of hypercatalyzed entropy that froze cellular processes. She couldn't replicate the potion, but she could weaponize its delivery. Using hollow saban needles and a delicate brush, she painted the tips with minute droplets of the black liquid. A single prick would not kill, but it would induce instant, localized paralysis for approximately 30 minutes. A limb would go dead, a lung would freeze mid-breath. It was a surgical tool of exquisite horror. She stored the coated saban in a black lacquer case lined with velvet. The cerebral dampener was the true engineering challenge. Fester's blueprints called for parts like crystallized nightmare shards and a capacitor made from a guilt-ridden soul, which were in short supply in Konoha. But the principle was sound. emit a tailored frequency of psychic noise to disrupt the recipient's sense of reality. Konoha, however, had chakra. And chakra, she had learned, was intimately tied to the nervous system and mental state. Genjutsu was proof. Her solution was a fusion of sciences. She purchased a simple, blank forehead protector. Then, she visited the Yamanaka flower shop under the guise of buying flowers suitable for a funeral. Inko Yamanaka, used to all sorts of requests, sold her a bouquet of black lilies and, crucially, a small vial of special ink the Yamanaka clan used for their mind-based jutsu formulas, ink that could hold chakra-sensitive patterns. Back in her lab, Wednesday became an artisan of unease. Using the Yamanaka ink and a needle so fine it was almost a hair, she began etching Fester's disruptive patterns onto the inside band of the forehead protector. But she didn't stop there. Drawing on her observations of Shikamaru's shadow stitching and the flow of Naruto's chakra, she added her own modifications, channels designed not to emit noise, but to reflect and scramble incoming chakra-based mental attacks. It was a psychoactive circuit board. The final component was power. The device needed a battery. She didn't have a guilt-ridden soul, but she had something almost as good, a pebble of stabilized, corrupted nature chakra from the first creature they'd defeated. It pulsed with a low-grade, malignant energy. Carefully, using tweezers and a steady hand, she embedded the pebble at the center of the forehead protector's intricate etching, where all the lines converged. She placed the completed headband on a stand. To the naked eye, it was a normal Konoha forehead protector with a slightly darker, more matte finish. To her senses, it hummed with a quiet, dissonant potential. She dubbed it the Nocturne Band. She needed field tests. The first test was involuntary and involved a minor village nuisance. At Ichiraku Ramen, a boisterous, lecherous merchant from the land of tea was loudly harassing Ayam, Tuchi's daughter, commenting on her appearance with crude, jovial compliments. Naruto was steaming, ready to throw a punch, but was constrained by village rules against attacking civilians. Wednesday, sitting beside him, slurping a single, plain noodle bowl she had deconstructed into its component parts, observed the scene. The merchant's energy was a gross, orange blob of entitlement. It was an aesthetic offense. His chakra signature is as subtle as a heart attack, she noted to Naruto. And his social tactics are a derivative of territorial primate displays. Predictable and dull. I'm gonna give him a Rasengan to the face, Naruto muttered, his knuckles white on his chopsticks. Unnecessary. And messy. I have a new variable to test. She reached into her sleeve and retrieved the Nocturne Band. She didn't put it on. She simply focused her will on it, activating the embedded pebble's energy and channeling a tiny wisp of her dark through the etched pathways. She aimed not at the merchant's mind, but at his perception of his immediate environment, specifically, his bowl of ramen. The merchant, mid-leer, picked up his chopsticks and dove into his steaming pork broth. He slurped a mouthful of noodles. And stopped. He blinked. He looked down at his bowl. The noodles, plump and white a moment before, now appeared to be writhing, pale worms. The slices of pork chashu seemed to pulse with a veiny, raw life. The broth darkened to the color of blood, and he could swear he saw a single, human eye blink up at him from the depths. He made a choked, gurgling sound. His face went from ruddy to green. He dropped the chopsticks as if they were red-hot and scrambled backward from the counter, pointing a trembling finger at his bowl. "Tea, they're alive! The food is alive!" Tucci and Ayam stared, bewildered. "Sir? It's just ramen." "Worms! Eyes! Blood!" the merchant shrieked, before turning and fleeing the stand, vomiting into a nearby gutter. The illusion lasted only 10 seconds before Wednesday disengaged the band. The bowl returned to its normal, appetizing state. Tucci looked at the abandoned bowl, then at Wednesday, who was placidly realigning her own noodles into geometric patterns. What just happened?" Naruto had seen the merchant's reaction. He looked at Wednesday, his anger replaced by awe and a touch of fear. "Did you?" "I provided a corrective lens for his perception," Wednesday said, putting the band away. "His mind filled in the details based on his own latent guilt and primal disgust. The tool merely provided the suggestion. The horror was his own creation. More efficient, and far more poetic, than physical violence." Tucci, a wise man, decided not to ask any more questions and simply served Naruto an extra egg. The second test was more direct. While on a routine perimeter patrol with Naruto, they encountered a missing nin, a rogue from the grass village, attempting to infiltrate Konoha's sewers. He was a genjutsu specialist, known for trapping his victims in illusions of suffocating mud before slitting their throats. He saw Naruto, a high-value target, the Jinchuriki, and his eyes gleamed. Well, the Leaf's golden boy and his little goth girlfriend. This is my lucky day." "Stay behind me," Naruto said, stepping in front of Wednesday. The missing Nin's hands flew through seals. Doton, Doro Genjutsu! Earth release, mud illusion technique. A wave of chakra washed over them. To Naruto, the world shifted. The ground beneath his feet turned to thick, sucking bog. The air became heavy and wet. He felt the mud climbing his legs, pulling him down. He struggled, trying to form a Kai release seal, but the illusion was strong, tactile. Wednesday felt the Genjutsu attempt to hook into her senses. It slithered against her mental barriers, trying to find purchase. It found none. Her mind, shaped by the dark, was not a fertile field for such crude psychological seeding. It was like trying to plant a flower in permafrost. But she saw Naruto stagger, his eyes glazing over. The missing Nin was drawing a kunai, smirking as he approached the helpless Jinchuriki. Wednesday didn't hesitate. She slipped the nocturne band onto her forehead. The moment it touched her skin, she felt the embedded pebble vibrate, the etched channels humming to life. She focused. Instead of trying to dispel the Genjutsu from Naruto, a complex task, she targeted its source. She used the band to amplify a pulse of her dark, not as an attack, but as a resonant dissonance. She aimed it at the delicate stream of chakra connecting the missing Nin to his illusion. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic for the caster. The missing Nin's smirk vanished. His own chakra, the medium of his illusion, was suddenly fed back into his mind, twisted and scrambled by the band's disruptive frequency and Wednesday's entropic pulse. He didn't see his own illusion. He experienced the sensory chaos inside it. To him, the world didn't become mud. It unraveled. Colors bled into sounds. The green of the trees became a deafening shriek. The smell of the sewer became a blinding flash of light. The feel of his own kunai in his hand became the taste of rotten metal. His brain, overloaded by the cross-wired sensory nightmare, short-circuited. He screamed, a raw, animal sound of pure psychic agony, and dropped to his knees, clutching his head. His Genjutsu collapsed. Naruto gasped as the mud vanished, finding himself standing on solid ground. The missing Nin was now a babbling, twitching wreck on the ground, staring at his own hands as if they were alien, screaming spiders. Naruto looked from the incapacitated ninja to Wednesday, who was calmly removing the band. "What did you do to him?" "I gave him his own medicine," she said, her voice devoid of triumph, only clinical satisfaction. "But I removed the safety cap. His mind attempted to process incompatible sensory data streams. A temporary psychosis. He will recover in a few hours, likely with a permanent migraine and a newfound fear of his own shadow. A suitable punishment for one who trades in manufactured nightmares." She walked over to the writhing man, pulled a pair of small shears from her bag, and neatly snipped off a lock of his hair. She placed it in a small black envelope. "For the tapestry," she explained to Naruto's bewildered look. The final, and most important, test was collaborative. Tsunade, briefed on Wednesday's research, had provided a controlled environment, a sealed training chamber usually used for poison gas exercises. The target was a bound, aggressive giant centipede summon, a creature with a simple, reactive mind, perfect for testing the stasis Samban. Kakashi and Shizen observed from behind a reinforced glass window. Naruto was inside with Wednesday, as her control subject, and backup. The centipede, freed from its bonds, charged with frightening speed, its many legs ablur, its mandibles clicking. "Naruto, provide a distraction. A large, obvious one," Wednesday instructed, her voice calm. She held a single, black-tipped Samban between her fingers. Naruto didn't question. He formed a shadow clone, which charged the centipede, yelling and waving its arms. The creature focused on the clone, its head striking forward. In that moment of focused attack, Wednesday moved. She didn't throw the Samban with shuriken jutsu force. She placed it, with the precision of an acupuncturist performing brain surgery. As the centipede's head darted past her position, she stepped in and drove the needle into a chitinous joint just behind its primary sensory cluster. The effect was silent and terrifying. The centipede didn't cry out. It didn't convulse. It just stopped. In mid-motion. Its charge became a frozen tableau. It was held in a perfect, living sculpture of attack. Its legs were suspended off the ground. Its mandibles were parted. Even the dust it had kicked up seemed to hang in the air around it for a second before settling. The only sign of life was the faint, frantic flickering of its compound eyes, trapped behind a wall of unmoving tissue. Naruto's clone poofed in surprise. He stared at the paralyzed monster. "Whoa. Temporal stasis in a localized field," Wednesday explained, walking around her immobilized subject. "Cellular processes are arrested. Neural signals cease. It is not unconsciousness. It is a pause. For the next 27 minutes and 14 seconds, it will be a statue, aware but unable to react. An ideal window for study, containment, or," she added, looking at the creature's eyes, Philosophical reflection on one's own helplessness. Shizen's voice came over the intercom, tinged with professional awe and horror. Vital signs confirm complete biological arrest in the affected zone. No spread to surrounding tissue. It's medically unprecedented. Kakashi's eye was wide. That's not a jutsu. That's alchemy. Applied necromancy. It is science, Wednesday corrected, retrieving her saban with a firm pull. The moment the needle left the chitin, the stasis field collapsed. The centipede crashed to the ground in a heap, disoriented and sluggish, its nervous system rebooting. It was harmless. She walked to the observation window, holding up the used saban. The potion's efficacy is within predicted parameters. A non-lethal, high-precision incapacitation tool. I have 12 more doses. Tsunade, who had entered the observation room, looked from the groggy centipede to the pale, serious girl. She saw not a weapon, but a new branch of shinobi science, one that was chillingly effective. You've just redefined capture missions, Addams. And given every interrogator in Tianai a new fantasy. She paused. The headband. Can it be replicated? By me, yes, Wednesday said. The patterns are keyed to my particular mental resonance. For others, it would be merely a flawed forehead protector. It is a personal tool. Tsunade nodded, a complex mix of relief and apprehension on her face. The girl was creating an entire arsenal from family heirlooms and sheer, morbid genius. She was becoming less of a liability and more of a one-of-a-kind strategic asset. A deeply, deeply unsettling one. That evening, back at the apartment, Wednesday updated her log. Addam's Konoha hybrid techniques, field test successful, * nocturne band, effective against chakra-based mental attacks, genjutsu. Induces sensory feedback psychosis in the caster. Efficiency, 94%. *** stasis samban, non-lethal biological arrest. Duration, 28 minutes, approximate. Precision, surgical. Potential for ethical misuse, high. Aesthetic, satisfying, * parental aid package, received and utilized. Sentiment attached, logically inefficient, yet tactically invaluable. Note, send Raven with thank you note and sample of Konoha's most aggressively cheerful flower, a sunflower, as ironic countergift. She placed the lock of the missing Neen's hair into an envelope, addressed it to the Addams family, 000 Cemetery Lane, and set it on the windowsill. The now recovered family raven, looking much perkier, hopped over and clamped it in its beak. To the tapestry, she told it. The bird gave a solemn nod and took off into the twilight, a black speck against the orange sky. Naruto watched it go, then looked at Wednesday, who was meticulously cleaning her saban case. Your family is something else. They are consistent, Wednesday said. In a world of variables, that is a comfort. She looked at him. Your training today. You were attempting to integrate wind nature chakra into the Rasengan with greater control. You failed 7 times. Your frustration peaked at attempt 5, but you did not trigger the fox's chakra. You recalibrated. That is progress. Naruto blinked, surprised she'd noticed. Yeah, well, undignified, right? A faint, almost ghost of a smile touched Wednesday's lips for a millisecond. Indeed. The tools were forged. The tests were passed. The Addams family jutsu were now part of Konoha's defensive calculus. As the knocking from the rift grew steadier, a new, chillingly efficient form of counterattack was ready. Not with roaring fireballs, but with silent needles and scrambled senses. The horror, it seemed, was learning to fight back. Next. Chapter 6, Festival of Phantoms. Konoha in festival mode was an assault on the senses. Paper lanterns in every garish color bobbed in the evening breeze, casting a warm, deceitfully cheerful glow over the streets. The air, usually scented with pine and earth, was now a thick soup of frying dough, sweet candied apples, and the cloying perfume of flowers sold by enthusiastic vendors. Music from a dozen different stalls, shamisen, drums, flutes, clashed in a cacophonous celebration of life. Laughter, bright and sharp, ricocheted off the buildings. Wednesday Addams stood on a quiet rooftop overlooking the main thoroughfare, a black silhouette against the riot of color. She wore her usual dress, a stark negative space in the vibrant scene below. The sensory overload was a physical pressure against her skin. A festival, she murmured to Naruto, who stood beside her, practically vibrating with excitement. A communal ritual to distract from the inevitability of decay with transient pleasures. It is psychologically transparent. Come on, Wednesday, it's fun, Naruto said, grinning so wide it looked painful. There's games, food, dancing. The daimyo's in town, so they've pulled out all the stops, Databeo. We're on watch duty, but we can still check it out. Our assignment is perimeter security, not cultural immersion, she stated, her eyes scanning the crowd not for joy, but for anomalies, for the quiet desperation beneath the smiles. Yeah, but the perimeter is the festival right now, Naruto argued. Come on, just for a bit. I'll buy you some dango. It's sweet. I have analyzed dango. It is a spherical paste of glutinous rice and sugar, devoid of nutritional complexity and symbolic of empty calories. It is the culinary equivalent of a false smile. But Naruto was already dragging her down from the roof by the sleeve, his grip surprisingly gentle but insistent. You gotta live a little. They melted into the throng. For Wednesday, it was like wading through a river of warm, noisy syrup. People jostled her, their bright yukatas brushing against her black dress. A child bumped into her, its sticky, candy-covered fingers leaving a faint residue on her skirt before its mother apologized profusely. Wednesday looked at the smudge as if it were a biological hazard. Naruto, however, was in his element. He greeted everyone, knew the stall owners, laughed with friends. He dragged Wednesday to a goldfish scooping game. Watch this. I'm a master! He was not. His first 2 paper nets dissolved immediately. On the 3rd try, he concentrated, his brow furrowed not in frustration, but in pure, determined fun. He successfully scooped a small, orange fish, depositing it into a bowl with a triumphant shout. For you, he said, presenting the bowl to Wednesday. She looked at the fish swimming in confused circles in its tiny prison. Carassius auratus. A creature of limited intellect and memory, condemned to an endless loop of its own existence in a chlorinated puddle. An apt metaphor for the festival itself. She took the bowl. I shall name him Sisyphus. Naruto's grin didn't falter. See? Fun! They continued. Wednesday subjected every spectacle to her analytical scorn. The fan dancers were predictably eurythmic. The sumo wrestlers were exhibitions of gravitational defiance with no practical combat application. The storytelling puppeteer was simplifying complex folkloric horror into palatable morality tales for children. Yet Naruto noticed she didn't ask to leave. Her eyes, while critical, missed nothing. She catalogued the structural integrity of the game stalls, the chemical composition of the street food smoke, the subtle patterns of the crowd's flow. As dusk deepened into true night, the festival reached its peak. A large stage had been erected in the central square for the main attraction, a troupe of spirit dancers from a distant, minor country. They were to perform the Dance of the Wandering Souls, a traditional piece meant to honor the dead. The troupe took the stage. They were dressed in flowing white and gray robes, with elaborate, ghostly masks. Their movements were slow, sinuous, and strangely compelling. They began to dance to a haunting melody played on reed flutes and a deep, resonant drum. The crowd fell into a respectful hush. Wednesday, who had been about to deliver a critique on the historical inaccuracy of the costumes, went still. Her head tilted. Do you hear that? She asked, her voice low. The music? Naruto asked, munching on a takoyaki. Beneath the music. A subharmonic. A vibration. Her eyes narrowed behind the bobbing lanterns. And the pattern of their footfalls on the stage. It's not random. It's a sigil. A large one. Naruto stopped chewing. He focused not on the dance, but on the feel of the air. As a Jinchuriki and a sensor of sorts, he felt it too, a faint, greasy pull on the ambient chakra. Not from the forest of death this time, but from right here, in the heart of the village. The festival's vibrant life energy, the collective emotional output of thousands of happy people, was being subtly siphoned. Drained and woven into the dancers' movements, channeled down through their patterned steps into the earth beneath the stage. They're not honoring the dead, Wednesday said, her voice cold and sharp. They're building a battery. Using the village's joy as fuel to widen the rift. The festival isn't a distraction, it's the catalyst. Before Naruto could react, the dance reached its crescendo. The lead dancer leapt into the air, and as she landed, she drove the butt of a ceremonial staff into the exact center of the stage. A visible pulse of white-green energy, shot through with the stolen colors of festival joy, erupted from the point of impact. It didn't explode outward. It shot downward into the earth. A deep bass drum passed through the ground, making lanterns sway and stall banners flutter. Then, from the edges of the square, from sewers and shadows and the spaces between buildings, the phantoms emerged. They were not the semi-corporeal amalgams of the forest. These were sharper, more defined, born of stolen memory and festive energy. They looked like twisted parodies of festival-goers, a grinning mask with too many teeth floating independently, a spectral goldfish the size of a horse made of lantern light and malice, a whirling dancer made of cutting confetti strips. They were festival phantoms, nightmares dressed in party clothes. The crowd's joy turned to screams in an instant. Panic erupted. We're on! Naruto yelled, his bowl of goldfish forgotten. He formed a dozen shadow clones that poofed into existence around him. Protect the civilians! Get them to the shelters! Wednesday was already moving. The nocturne band was on her forehead in an instant. She didn't target the phantoms first. She targeted the stage. The dancers, their ritual complete, were now channeling the stolen energy, maintaining the gateway that was spewing forth these entities. Their minds would be focused, single purpose. She focused the band's disruptive frequency into a tight beam and aimed it at the lead dancer. The dancer, who had been radiating a serene, otherworldly focus, suddenly stumbled. The stolen festival joy in her mind curdled. The bright memories of laughter turned into echoing shrieks. The taste of candy apples became the taste of blood. She clutched her mask-covered head and screamed, breaking the channel. The flow of energy from the stage stuttered. But it was too late to stop the phantoms already loose. The confetti dancer swept through a stall, its paper strips cutting like razors, shredding wood and canvas. The giant goldfish phantom opened its mouth and swallowed a cluster of lanterns, its body glowing with a malevolent, captured light. Naruto's clones were everywhere, hurting people, forming human shields. The real Naruto faced the masked ghost. A standard Rasengan passed right through it, disrupting its form for a second before it reformed, grinning wider. "They're made of energy and emotion. You can't punch them," Wednesday called out, ducking under a sweep of confetti. She analyzed the goldfish phantom. It was a construct of light and stolen. Its core was the swallowed lantern cluster. "Naruto! The goldfish! Its core is physical! The lantern's inside it!" Naruto nodded. He abandoned the mask and shot towards the giant, glowing fish. It turned, opening its maw to swallow him whole. Naruto didn't flinch. He jumped into its mouth. Inside, it was a storm of swirling light and disorienting joy turned horror. He saw the cluster of real, paper lanterns, burning with a sickly green flame at the creature's heart. He formed a small, compact Rasengan, the controlled, dense one he'd been practicing, and slammed it into the lantern cluster. There was a sound like shattering glass and a dying carnival tune. The goldfish phantom burst apart in a shower of harmless, fading light and falling paper. Meanwhile, Wednesday faced the confetti dancer. It was fast, a whirlwind of cutting edges. She couldn't get close enough for a stasis summon. Instead, she used the environment. She backed towards a stall selling sweet, sticky aim candy. As the phantom slashed at her, she kicked over a large pot of the molten, sugary syrup. The confetti strips, slicing through the air, became coated in the viscous liquid. They stuck together, their edges gummed up, their movements slowing from a deadly whirlwind to a struggling, sticky mess. Wednesday calmly stepped forward and drove a stasis samban into the central knot of the now dangled entity. It froze into a bizarre, glittering sculpture of arrested violence. The masked ghost was the real problem. It was intangible, feeding on fear. And the square was full of fear now. It grew larger, its grin stretching. "It's a fear eater!" Wednesday yelled over the chaos. "Your Rasengan's energy just feeds it. You have to counter the emotion." Naruto landed beside her, panting. "How do I fight fear?" Wednesday looked at him, at his wide, determined blue eyes in the midst of the panic. "With the one thing you have in absurd, illogical abundance." Naruto understood. He didn't face the mask. He turned his back on it and faced the fleeing, terrified villagers. He cupped his hands around his mouth and yelled, with every ounce of his being, not a war cry, but a promise. "Everyone! Don't be afraid!" His voice, amplified by chakra, boomed over the screams, startlingly clear. "I'm Uzumaki Naruto, future Hokage, and I'm not gonna let anyone get hurt in my village. So keep running to safety. We've got this, Databeo." It wasn't a technique. It was pure, undiluted Naruto. A declaration so brimming with stubborn, reckless, sunbright certainty that it was almost a physical force. The masked ghost, which had been flowing toward a cluster of cowering children, wavered. The fear it was feasting on lessened. Just for a moment. Replaced by a flicker of confused hope. That moment was all Wednesday needed. She couldn't attack the fear. But she could attack the absence it left behind. She focused the nocturne band not on the ghost, but on the space the children occupied, pushing a wave of her, dark, the silence after the scream, the calm after the panic. It was an emotional null field. The children's terrified whimpers quieted. Their wide, tear-filled eyes cleared slightly. The masked ghost shuddered. Its food source was gone, replaced by an empty plate. It let out a silent shriek of frustration and turned on Naruto, its form condensing into a spear of pure, concentrated dread aimed at his heart. Naruto stood his ground. He didn't raise his hands to fight. He grinned, a fierce, challenging grin directly into the face of the fear. "You're not welcome here." The spear of dread hit him. And shattered. It broke against the unshakable bedrock of his will. The fear dissolved, not because he was immune, but because he refused it. He accepted its existence and then chose, defiantly, joyfully, stubbornly, to stand anyway. The masked ghost flickered, its grin turning into a rictus of confusion, and then dissipated like smoke in a strong wind. Silence fell, broken only by the distant sounds of the village alarm and the moans of the incapacitated lead dancer on the stage. The other spirit dancers had fled. The remaining phantoms, bereft of their source, faded. The square was a wreck of toppled stalls, scattered festival debris, and the eerie, frozen statue of the confetti dancer. But there were no civilian casualties. Inbu and Chunin swarmed in to secure the area. Naruto slumped, adrenaline draining. Wednesday walked over to him. Her dress was smudged with sugar syrup and dust, a strand of hair had escaped her braid, and she held a small bowl with a confused goldfish. "You were adequate," she said. Naruto laughed, a tired, relieved sound. "Adequate? We saved everyone. The tactical objective was achieved. Your method was theatrically excessive, but metabolically efficient for your particular psychology." She looked at the bowl. Sisyphus survived. As the cleanup began, Tsunade arrived, her face thunderous. She took in the scene, the broken stage, the frozen phantom, the captured cultist. Her gaze landed on Naruto and Wednesday. "Report. Now." Later, on a rooftop far from the chaos, the festival's distant glow was a bruise on the night sky. They were off duty, their report filed. Naruto had procured 2 bowls of actual, non-haunted ramen from a grateful Tsuchi, who had reopened his stand for the heroes. They ate in silence for a while, the only sound the slurping of noodles and the faint echo of the village alarm being stood down. "You know," Naruto said, breaking the quiet. "Back there, you said my method worked for my psychology. What's yours?" Wednesday finished a precise bite. "I observe the machinery of horror. I identify the moving parts, fear, despair, joy turned to poison, and I apply the correct tool to jam the gears. A stasis needle here, a psychic feedback loop there. It is engineering. But don't you ever feel, I dunno, something? When you stop it?" She looked out at the village. "I feel the restoration of a preferred state of equilibrium. The cessation of a noisy, inelegant intrusion. It is satisfaction of a sort. A quiet one." Naruto nodded, not fully understanding, but accepting. "It's weird. That cultist, she was using happiness. Festival happiness. To make monsters. The most potent horrors are often forged in the fires of their opposites," Wednesday said. "Love turns to obsession. Hope curdles into despair. Joy, when stolen and twisted, becomes a particularly sharp kind of madness. It is why festivals are, fundamentally, perilous." Naruto was quiet for a long moment. Then, in a voice much softer than his usual boisterous tone, he said, "You know, before I met you, my worst memories were of being alone during festivals. Watching everyone else have families, have fun. I'd sit on the monument, eating a stale bun, and just hate it. All the noise and the laughing. It felt like it was mocking me." Wednesday listened. She did not offer sympathy. She offered data. A logical response. "You were an outsider to a ritual of inclusion. Your aversion was a defense mechanism." "Yeah. But tonight, it was still loud and kinda stupid. But fighting for it, with someone, it felt different. It didn't feel like it was mocking me anymore. It felt like something worth being loud and stupid for." He looked at her, his blue eyes serious in the dim light. "Thanks for being my someone." Wednesday held his gaze. The cacophony of the festival was gone, leaving only the deep, resonant quiet of the night. His words were illogical. Partnership was a tactical necessity, not an emotional one. Yet, the data point was undeniable. His presence had made the intolerable, tolerable. Even, in a chaotic, inefficient way, marginally engaging. "You are an anomaly, Naruto Uzumaki," she stated finally. "You generate meaning from chaos. You build bridges from rejection. It is not inefficient. For you." She looked down at her ramen bowl, then at his empty one. "Your culinary choice, while nutritionally suspect, was palatable. Perhaps, we could repeat this observational exercise. Under less apocalyptic circumstances." Naruto's grin returned, slow and real. "A date, Wednesday? Are you asking me on a date?" "I am proposing a controlled, recurring analysis of a local cultural food service establishment," she corrected, but there was no venom in it. "The variable of companionship will be held constant to measure its effect on the sensory experience." "Sounds like a date to me," Naruto said, his smile threatening to split his face. Wednesday did not smile back. But as she turned to look back at the recovering village, the ghost of the festival's light reflected in her dark eyes, and for a moment, they didn't look like pools of oblivion. They looked like deep, still water, holding a single, captured star. The Festival of Phantoms was over. The horror had been defeated with a combination of engineered silence and defiant noise. And in the quiet aftermath, Something new and fragile had been forged in the space between them, not a weapon, not a tool, but a connection. As unpredictable and stubborn as the boy who made it. Next,